Members of the jury, I will now read the verdicts as they will appear in the permanent records of the 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota, County of Hennepin, District Court, 4th Judicial District. State of Minnesota Plaintiff versus Derek Michael Chauvin, Defendant. Verdict, Count 1. Court File Number 27, CR 20-12646. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 1, unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:44 p.m. Signed, Juror Foreperson, Juror Number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 2. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 2, third-degree murder, perpetrating an eminently dangerous act, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Signed by Jury Foreperson, Juror Number 19. Same caption, verdict Count 3. We, the jury, in the above entitled matter as to Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, culpable negligence, creating an unreasonable risk, find the defendant guilty. This verdict agreed to this 20th day of April 2021 at 1:45 p.m. Jury Foreperson 019. Members of the jury, I'm now going to ask you individually if these are your true and correct verdicts. Please respond yes or no. Juror Number 2, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 9, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 19, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 27, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 44, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 52, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 55, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 79, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 85, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 89, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 91, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror Number 92, are these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Are these your verdicts, so say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Members of the jury, I find that the verdicts as read reflect the will of the jury and will be filed accordingly. I have to thank you on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota for not only jury service, but heavy-duty jury service. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to follow the deputy back into your usual room, and I will join you in a few minutes to answer questions and to advise you further. So, all rise for the jury. All right, be seated. With the guilty verdicts returned, we're going to have Blakely, you may file a written argument as to Blakely factors within 1 week. The court will issue findings on the Blakely factors, the factual findings, 1 week after that. We'll order a PSI immediately returnable in 4 weeks. And we will also have a briefing on, after you get the PSI, 6 weeks from now, and then 8 weeks from now, we will have sentencing. We'll get you the exact dates in a scheduling order. Is there a motion on behalf of the state?
Your Honor, the state would move to have the court revoke the defendant's bail and remand him into custody pending sentencing.
Bail is revoked, bond is discharged, and the defendant is remanded to the custody of the Hennepin County Sheriff. Anything further?
Oh,
All right. Thank you. We're adjourned.
So, counsel, dates, I can send you to me.
We just saw the jury return their verdict guilty on all 3 counts. Guilty on the second-degree murder, guilty on the third-degree murder, guilty on the second-degree manslaughter, showing that the prosecutors, the state of Minnesota, has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt to all 12 jurors. Let me chat with my guest about this Judge Birmingham, in a way, I'm choked up. The way Judge Cahill obviously doing what he does best, okay? The way he does what he does best, which is get in there, read the verdicts, and then get out. You know what? We're going to go outside, Judge, and listen to what's happening outside in the Hennepin County Courthouse. Let's listen. This is the crowd outside the Hennepin County Courthouse, where Derek Chauvin has just been found guilty by a jury of...
Why should you invest in stocks on eToro?
With eToro, I can invest.
Other layers, having other officers speak against Derek Chauvin and now having the jury say he was guilty on all three accounts are just, it's phenomenal. And I'm looking at the faces of the people in the crowd there. You see tears. You know, there is maybe relief, but again, is it really joy? Because George Floyd is gone and he won't be coming back, but his life and what it accomplished is monumental in this country.
James Homan, you're a native of Minnesota. We can see there the feed not just outside the courthouse where people are rejoicing with relief, but also the scene outside Cup Foods where Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd. We can now use that word. He was found guilty on those 3 charges. The jury has spoken. What is it like for you to witness this crowd and also to see the scene outside of Cup Foods?
It really is surreal because it is so unusual. Sadly, there's been a lot of police violence in recent years in Minnesota, including just last weekend. And I think Rhonda's term is exactly right, relief but not joy. You know, you obviously, the jury's quick move with every factor that Rhonda was talking about, the blue line falling, the overwhelming video evidence, but most officers who use excessive force aren't fully charged or prosecuted, and there are systemic issues that still need to be addressed. But this is a huge moment for people who didn't feel like the justice system could still do what it is designed to do. And here, a jury of his peers deliberated quickly and delivered justice swiftly.
Eugene, we're watching someone replace the sign there about changing it to justice served, although also putting a question mark there. In many ways, this verdict was predictable because of the overwhelming evidence, but in other ways, Eugene, it was like unthinkable just because of the history of prosecutions against police and how they so rarely amount to a successful prosecution, Eugene.
This is not the first time a police officer has been on trial for killing a black person and there's been overwhelming evidence. And so there are people who were surprised, if you look at the responses on social media, to see that Chauvin was found guilty on all 3 charges. And quite frankly, I was one of them because despite watching this, despite seeing all the evidence, despite hearing the testimonies, we know that different people process this issue differently based on their identities, their own histories, their own narratives and views and beliefs about policing and race in this country. And so the response that we got was a relief to so many people, a surprise to so many others, but there are also some people who will be uncomfortable with this. And I imagine that Chauvin's defense team is one of them, obviously, and that's why we can expect an appeal.
Keith, let's go to you as someone who's covered so many murder trials over the years. What's your reaction today?
You know, what jumped out of me really is, yes, this might bring some type of justice to the Floyd family, most definitely. But I'm also wondering about people around the country who particularly African-American people, who thought there's no way that who maybe I'm a victim of excessive violence or assault by a police officer, that I will ever get justice. And a lot of people are thinking it's not going to happen. If it doesn't happen with this case, if it doesn't happen with the fact that everything is on video, the audio, with all these police officers coming out against one of their own, if it doesn't happen here, when or how will it happen? And I think that is what you're seeing a lot of people today. You're definitely seeing joy on behalf of the Floyd family, but you're also seeing some relief among people who are thinking, okay, maybe this says that the justice system will look at the actual evidence and actually look at the fact that some of these officers, while the majority of the officers, yes, are law-abiding and do what they are trained to do and uphold peace, yes, officers are human and mistakes happen, whether intentional or unintentional. And I think that's what you're seeing. I think you're seeing a relief just wave among so many people out there who are saying maybe possibly justice can be served regardless of skin color and regardless of even economic background or what have you.
Let's go to Hannah Jewell, our national reporter, who is live outside of the courthouse where the verdict was just read. Hannah.
Hi, Libby. There was a very emotional reaction the moment that a man yelled out the word guilty and everyone erupted. And in emotion, I saw people crying and people set off on a march in the streets of Minneapolis already. And I'm here with Nate, who's a member of Visual Black Justice, a Minneapolis-based group. Nate, tell me how that moment felt for you.
I think I was just speechless. It was a mix of emotions. I was relieved. I was happy. I'm still sad. I'm still mourning. There's just a lot of mixed emotions right now, but I think that the best way I can describe it right now is that we just finished the preliminary round of a track meet. We're going into the finals now. We're not done. The work doesn't finish with just this one case, but
what happens next then? Do you take a moment to celebrate the verdict that you wanted? Or?
I think we take a moment, but it's a moment. This is not something that's gonna stop because we got this one verdict. I think that the relief that we feel for some of us as activists and organizers is enough that we're ready to keep going. But I think that we are going to be happy we can go to sleep tonight in peace, and we don't have to worry about our city. We don't have to worry about another failed case. But the work still starts tomorrow when we wake up. Our demands don't end here. We want to reopen all the other cases in Minnesota. We want to end qualified immunity, and those things are things that take time. They take persistence. They take, patience, and it takes teamwork, and it takes not giving up and pushing forward regardless.
Can I ask if you're expecting this verdict?
I feel like a lot of people in the BIPOC community and the Black community were cautiously optimistic. We were pessimistically optimistic. We were hoping for the best, but expecting to have things be more the same old. With it being guilty though, it sets a precedent. It turns a new page. It does show police officers specifically that you can and will be held accountable. And we will apply the proper peaceful pressure for that to happen. We're not gonna just let a badge and a gun let murder be okay. It's not acceptable, and we won't accept it. So I think this is really a good example of what community looks like. I think that we have a bunch of very fearless Black women leaders out there. Thina and Tay are mine at Visual Black Justice, and I could not have been more proud to stand by their side. I will keep standing by their side, and we'll keep fighting this fight because it's not over.
Thanks so much, Nate. What are you going to do now?
We're going to go celebrate for a little bit, regroup, and there's more to come because Visual Black Justice doesn't take a break. So.
All right, thanks so much. As you can hear, there are horns honking around me and people chanting George Floyd and starting to march, and a lot of people just crying, Libby.
All right, Hannah Jewell, thank you so much, live for us in Minneapolis, and you can see the live images there. If you're just joining us, let's recap. The jury has found Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts. You can see there second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. He was remanded into custody. Let's go to Mary Beth Albright for more on what cemented this case. We heard Keith talk about this overwhelming video evidence, not just the bystander video that became so famous from Darnella Frazier, but so many other videos as well, Mary Beth, body cam footage, security footage. Mary Beth, what do you see as the defining elements that showed the jury Derek Chauvin was guilty?
Well, it's interesting, Libby, because when we go back to those elements that we talked about, the different the causation that we discussed, that with the cause of death. Sorry, I see my dog going around in the background. We talk about the cause of death. It is so important and so critical in this, and the jury instruction that was so critical that it was about whether there were any other causes that could have contributed to it, and the judge and the prosecution really hammering home that it was that there could have been other causes, right? There could have been other substantial, there could have been other factors, but the substantial factor was Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck. And what I really thought was interesting about that, at the end, after the verdict was read, after the jury left, you heard Judge Cahill talking to Derek Chauvin about the Blakely waiver and the PSI, which is a pre-sentence investigation, and that 8 weeks from now, which is 2 months from now, they're going to do the sentencing. And that pre-sentence investigation is going to be so critical, because a Blakely waiver means that Derek Chauvin has decided that he's going to allow the court, the judge, to decide if there were any aggravating factors that allows his sentence to go up. Right? And the aggravating factors could really be anything. It could be a particular cruelty of the crime. The aggravating factor could be that there were children present, right? We know that there were 2 teenagers present and a 9-year-old. So all of those things could make the sentence even worse. And even more aggravated. And so all those things are still yet to come. I also thought it was interesting that they made sure that that Judge Cahill said that the sentencing would be in 8 weeks, because I think that some people expected that if Derek Chauvin was found guilty, that there would be a sentencing around the 1-year mark, the anniversary of the murder. Now we can call it murder, on May 25th. But now we see that it's going to be toward late June rather than late May. So I think that's significant too.
You can see there the largest image on your screen is outside of Cup Foods, where this memorial has been created. Looking at that painting there, that image of George Floyd, who was alive a year ago, as Mary Beth points out. We're not even yet on the 1-year anniversary of his death. Let's go to you, James, for the community reaction that we're seeing. And, Hannah's talking to people who say this is a step they believe towards justice, but it's a step, and they say there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, and that interview was really a good window into so many folks I've talked to, especially African Americans in Minneapolis, who were kind of pessimistic that they would actually this jury would find Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts. And one of the things that this is significant for is that through the 3 other officers who were on the scene, whose body camera footage we've seen over the last 3 weeks, they're all facing trial together in August. And it is interesting because the 8 weeks for sentencing, then you're going to have the 3 other officers stand trial. Those cases are going to be easier to prove after Chauvin was found guilty, but they're less clear cut because there isn't a knee on the back. It's more related to whether the officers should have intervened with this veteran of the force. One of the officers had literally just started that week. And so for the community of Minneapolis, this is not over. There's going to be an appeal. There's going to be these other trials, sentencing. And so and Dewante Wright, that officer who fatally shot him, is going to be tried. So this is in some ways kind of just the beginning of this summer of trauma for a lot of people in the Twin Cities.
Let's go to Minneapolis, where reporter Joyce Coe joins us now from outside Cup Foods. Joyce.
Hey, Libby, there is a lot going on right here. So I just want to sort of walk you through. We are right outside of Cup Foods, where there is a memorial that has been formed around the site where George Floyd lost his life. And I'm joined by Megan and BJ, 2 Minneapolis residents who came here. What brought you out here? Was it after you heard the verdict? Were you prepping to hear the verdict at this location?
Yeah, basically once we heard that they were going to be actually announcing it today, We just wanted to kind of come out because I was honestly really afraid of what could be like a powder keg type of situation that could happen, but to see the relief and just the joy and everybody's having and to actually have some semblance of justice, it feels like a new day in America.
Megan, what is the significance of being at this location right now? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling very overwhelmed. There's a lot of energy, a lot of sadness, but it's a big celebration right now. And it's just an indescribable feeling to be here.
BJ, how did you feel before today, before you knew what that verdict was going to be? How did you feel hearing it from your expectations of what you thought, was going to happen?
I mean, to be honest, it was... It felt like when it happened last year that it felt like this situation was different, but being a black man, we've seen this so many times before, and honestly, I just harken back to the Rodney King situation where the same thing. Everybody saw that very clearly, and the cops still got off, and I was really afraid that it was going to be a similar situation, which is why I feel like today is different. It's something new in America. It's actually recognizing black humanity, and I feel like that might be a first step that could actually do something.
Yeah, Megan, this is not really the result that we see in a lot of these cases of police brutality, of use of force. Were you surprised at all to hear the verdict, guilty on all 3 counts?
Not surprised, I guess. I was really hopeful, and I guess just hopefully... that I was hoping the jury would see, what we clearly have all seen, and with the prosecution, I thought they did a really good job, and I wasn't super surprised, I guess. But.
Well, thank you both so much. I do want to ask you about a moment before this happened. There was money that was flying in the air, and you guys actually got some of it. What does this feel like? Would you consider this a celebration? How do you sort of describe this feeling out here?
This is a major celebration, honestly, because if this had have gone the other way, all you could do is pray for this city. And and this is a city that we all love, that are here. Everybody that's from here loves this city, and it's such a great day. It is a beautiful celebration. It started with relief, but honestly, hopefully it can catapult into something more in the future.
BJ, Megan, thank you both so much, and stay safe. Thanks. I'll send things back to you, Libby.
All right, Joyce Coe live outside Cup Foods where George Floyd lost his life. We are watching what's happening here and monitoring statements and announcements coming out in the wake of the guilty verdicts, guilty on all charges. Derek Chauvin found guilty on all 3 counts. Rhonda, we just saw the Floyd family walk by a moment ago. Their attorney, Ben Crump, has been putting out some statements, one of them thanking the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, and his team, along with our legal team, he writes, for their fierce dedication to justice, and saying it doesn't end here. Ben Crump writing, we still have work to do. And he lists these things, Rhonda: passing the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act to hold police accountable and prevent the unjustified killings of marginalized people of color. So let's talk about what happens next in terms of legislation.
Well, I think this could give some momentum to the legislative proposals that are out there. I've done some reporting back, weeks after George Floyd's killing. Congress, the House, drafted up a bill that they call the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And it includes a lot of things that some people, when you read the bill, are like, well, this doesn't exist already. It includes things like having a misconduct registry. So an officer who is dismissed or had problems at another department can't go to another city or another state and be an officer there. And those things don't exist. But that effort stalled after it passed the House. It stalled in the Senate. They came up with their own version, led by Republican Tim Scott. And from what I'm hearing from sources, it's still on the table, but because Congress is dealing with so many other things, they've been waiting to see what happens with this, to see if it ignites more momentum for those proposals. So it's likely we could see something soon. I do know in moments Nancy Pelosi And Jim Clyburn will be joined by the Congressional Black Caucus at the Capitol and giving their response to this. And Karen Bass will be with them. She's the author of that George Floyd bill, so I'm tuning in to see what they have to say and if they say that this verdict gives them any more momentum to keep pushing for police reform. But you also should consider that city councils, including Minneapolis City Council, have done measures, or at least brought measures forward that deal with policing, that deal with traffic stops that go wrong. So George Floyd's life, yes, it got Congress's attention, but it also got these local municipalities' attention as well, because they know there's an issue. And I'm wondering now that the Chauvin verdict is that he is guilty on all counts, is going to resonate with other local police departments who now see that misconduct that has been decried for decades now is front and center on many Americans' mind, and reform is something that is really supported by a lot of Americans.
James, we can see there on our screen the group of attorneys who were prosecuting this case. There were a total of 14 attorneys, working on the prosecution's team. Of course, Attorney General Keith Ellison, someone we saw just today. We saw him yesterday in the courtroom there, sort of behind the prosecutors as they did their job and did that sort of spade work of trying to build their case and convince the jury. We will go live to the microphones when Keith Ellison gives remarks. But let's talk about this team, James.
Yeah, it's a large team, includes partners at Hogan and Lovells, which is a big DC-based law firm. They're doing the work pro bono. They helped kind of do some of the prosecutorial work on the second-degree murder case. It's people from the state-level Attorney General's office, the Hennepin County Prosecutor's office, and it really is a large legal enterprise that took this on. A massive amount of evidence, obviously so many videos, and Eric Nelson was working with the lawyers for the other officers who are facing, the current officers who are facing charges in August, but it had a helper in the room with him, but really kind of much more legal firepower on the prosecution side. And it is interesting that, a lot of these prosecutors, they're part of law enforcement, especially at the Hennepin County level. They work closely with police every day to bring cases, to call officers as witnesses. They certainly have prosecuted people for resisting arrest. They've prosecuted a lot of people for small crimes, like the one that George Floyd was accused of that caused the police to show up in the first place. So it's quite a dramatic reversal to have these prosecutors. It's not just the blue line, but it also taking on one of their own. And that's one of the reasons it was so dramatic that, people who were part of law enforcement essentially prosecuting one of their own.
Rhonda, we often think of Keith Ellison as Congressman Ellison because we covered his time here in Washington serving as a member of the House of Representatives. But let's talk about his role as Attorney General as the first African American, the first Muslim American to be elected to statewide office in Minnesota.
Right, yes, as you mentioned, he was a former congressman. Right now, Ilhan Omar holds that seat that he held previously. But his involvement in this case, he did not come to the microphone and give any arguments or do any of the witness testimony, but he has been overseeing this case, and that again is another precedent as well. There were some concerns last year that some of the county attorneys in Hennepin County wouldn't be able to handle this case because of the magnitude of it, and that they were perhaps too closely attached to those involved. So the people there agree that it should be given to the Attorney General's office. And yesterday we did see Keith Ellison in the courtroom. He was sitting behind the prosecution team. I think it says a lot that this, again, will be something in the history books with this George Floyd and Derek Chauvin verdict here, is that it was handled by a black attorney general and who kept a very quiet role visibly, but said early on that he was developing a very, very tight case, although he did tell people to brace themselves because he knew that the conviction rate for officers is pretty low. So he helped manage expectations, but what we've seen in the last few weeks is that he did build a pretty incredible case.
Rhonda, I have to refer back to something you mentioned earlier. You were talking about the Rodney King verdict and how so many of these jurors are young. They may not have even been alive. I mean, some of them in their 20s were not even alive those in their 30s might have been babies or toddlers when the Rodney King case happened.
That's so true. That's a great point. Half of them may not remember at all what happened 30 years ago, last month actually, with the Rodney King case. And that was a case that so many black people, especially those in Los Angeles, felt that video that they had at that time, that you saw the officers beating him, was enough. But it was not in the end. And I'm wondering if any of the jurors, the older jurors on this jury, thought about that we all remember that, and remember that it spurred protests and a riot in LA. And it's just another indication that this has been a decades-long issue. You may even say centuries, actually, if you look at the history of policing in this country and you look at, emancipation and what happened after that with convict leasing and all of that. I won't go into the history, but this is a long thread in the experience of Black America, and that's another reason why I'm saying this verdict today is so historic, because we've had evidence before and it did not go anywhere. And I think one of the people that Joyce interviewed there said that he was cautiously optimistic, but he just knew the past and wasn't getting his hopes up.
We're watching to see if the Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, and the prosecution team comes to the microphones. In the meantime, though, let's go to our crime and courts reporter, Keith Alexander. Keith, what sort of a reaction are you hearing from police officers and people in law enforcement as we learn that Derek Chauvin, a former police officer who served for more than 18 years in Minneapolis, is guilty?
A while ago, I had like 4 text messages from some of my sources who are detectives.
Keith, I'm going to have to just put you on hold for one moment to go to another Keith, to go to Keith Ellison, the Attorney General. We'll get back to our reporter colleagues in just a moment. Let's go live now to outside the courthouse.
There's more room on this side? Yeah, more room to your right. Yes, thank you. That's much better. So Natasha, people got to be able to see the baby too. So.
Especially after the baby ran here, right?
Yeah. Baby on board.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison. I'm the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. And since the investigation and prosecution of this case began last May, everyone involved has pursued one goal: justice. We pursued justice wherever it led. When I became the lead prosecutor for the case, I asked for time and patience to review the facts, gather evidence, and prosecute for the murder of George Floyd to the fullest extent the law allowed. I want to thank the community for giving us that time and allowing us to do our work. That long, hard, painstaking work has culminated today. I would not call today's verdict justice, however, because justice implies true restoration. But it is accountability, which is the first step towards justice. And now the cause of justice is in your hands. And when I say your hands, I mean the hands of the people of the United States. George Floyd mattered. He was loved by his family and his friends. His death shocked the country.
We've lost the audio feed there for Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General. We'll get that back as soon as we can, talking about this moment in history, but also asking what real justice would be. And we're hearing from, let's go back now to the Attorney General.
We're a bouquet of humanity, a phrase I stole from my friend Jerry Blackwell. A bouquet of humanity, old, young, men and women, black and white, a man from the neighborhood just walking to get a drink, a child going to buy a snack with her cousin, an off-duty firefighter on her way to a community garden, brave young women, teenagers, who press record on their cell phones. Why did they stop? They didn't know George Floyd. They didn't know he had a beautiful family. They didn't know he had been a great athlete, and they didn't know he was a proud father or that he had people in his life who loved him. They stopped and raised their voices and they even challenged authority because they saw his humanity. They stopped and they raised their voices because they knew that what they were seeing was wrong. They didn't need to be medical professionals or experts in the use of force. They knew it was wrong, and they were right. These community members, this bouquet of humanity, did it again in this trial. They performed simple yet profound acts of courage. They told the truth, and they told the whole world the truth about what they saw. They were vindicated by the chief of police, by Minneapolis' longest-serving police officer, and by many other police officers who stepped up and testified as to what they saw and to what they knew. What happened on that street was wrong. We owe it, and we owe our gratitude to fulfilling we owe them our gratitude for fulfilling their civic duty and for their courage in telling the truth. To countless people in Minnesota and across the United States who joined them in peacefully demanding justice for George Floyd, we say, all of us, thank you. In the coming days, more may seek to express themselves again through petition and demonstration. I urge everyone to honor the legacy of George Floyd by doing so calmly, legally, and peacefully. I urge everyone to continue the journey to transformation and justice. It's in your hands now. I also want to address the Floyd family, if I may. Over the last year, the family of George Floyd had to relive again and again the worst day of their lives when they lost their brother, their father, their friend. I'm profoundly grateful to them for giving us the time we needed to prosecute this case. They have shown the world what grace and class and courage really look like. Although a verdict alone cannot end their pain, I hope it's another step on the long path toward healing for them. There's no replacing your beloved Perry, or Floyd, as his friends called him, but he is the one who sparked a worldwide movement, and that's important. We owe our thanks to the men and women of the jury who gave many hours of their time and attention to carefully listening to the evidence, weighing the facts, rendering a verdict. They are regular people from all walks of life, a lot like that bouquet of humanity on that corner on May 25th and in that courtroom. They answered the call, and they served in a landmark trial. They now deserve to return to their lives. If they ask you to respect their privacy, we ask you to honor that request. I want to acknowledge the remarkable team that helped us prosecute the case. We put everything we had into this prosecution. We presented the best case that we could, and the jury heard us, and we're grateful for that. We had the sole burden of proof in the case, and history shows that winning cases like these can be difficult. I'm proud of every hour, every minute, and every ounce of effort we put in this case. And let me tell you, we spent many hours working on this case, did we not? We, week after week, committee meeting after committee meeting, this team never let up and it never quit. We fought every day, and we did it together. The Attorney General's office together with the Hennepin County Attorney's office. Thank you, sir. And we did it together. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who worked on the case. Most of these folks will tell you it's a bad idea to put together a team of all Michael Jordans. Nobody would want to pass the ball. This team, that was their true strength, is sharing the load, passing the ball, understanding that all of us together are smarter than any one of us alone. And that worked. Although the verdict has been rendered, this is not the end. In the coming weeks, the court will determine sentencing, and later this summer, we expect to present another case. We will not be talking about that. This verdict reminds us how hard it is to make enduring change. And I just want to finish by sharing some important historical legacy, if you allow me. In 1968, the Kerner Commission was formed to investigate the causes of uprisings across major American cities. And a man named Dr. Kenneth Clark, a famous African-American psychologist who, along with his equally accomplished psychologist wife, Mamie, contributed to compelling research in the Brown versus Board of Education case. And Dr. Clark testified at the Kerner Commission. And I want to quote you what he said. I read that report, the one in the 1919 riot in Chicago, and it was as if I were reading the report of investigating the committee of the Harlem riot in 1935, the report on investigating the Harlem riot in 1943, and the report of the McCone Commission on the Watts riot. I must say again in candor to you, the members of this commission, it's like a kind of an Alice in Wonderland with the same moving picture reshown over and over again, the same analysis, the same recommendation, and the same inaction. Those are the words of Dr. Clark in 1968. Here we are in 2021. Here we are in 2021, still addressing the same problem. Since Dr. Clark testified, we have seen Rodney King, Abner Louima, Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, Laquan McDonald, Stephon Clark, Atiana Jefferson, Anton Black, Breonna Taylor, and now Dante Wright and Adam Toledo. This has to end. We need true justice. That's not one case. That is a social transformation that says that nobody's beneath the law and no one is above it. This verdict reminds us that we must make enduring systemic societal change. More than a month ago, months before George Floyd was murdered, the Minnesota Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington and I released the recommendations of our working group on reducing deadly force encounters with law enforcement. What all of us in that working group, including law enforcement, wanted is for everyone to go home safe. Anytime someone doesn't, everyone's lives are changed forever. We need to use this verdict as an inflection point. What if we just prevented the problem instead of having to try these cases? We don't want any more community members dying at the hands of law enforcement and their families' lives ruined. We don't want any more law enforcement members having to face criminal charges and their families' lives ruined. We don't want any more communities torn apart. One way to prevent this is to get into a new relationship where we as a society re-examine the use of force and our old settled assumptions. I'm so proud of Chief Arredondo and the Minneapolis police officers who by their testimony said enough is enough. And another way to prevent it is by acknowledging and lifting up everyone's humanity, helping communities heal, and officers be well. Another way to prevent it is with accountability. Passing laws and instituting policies and training is important, but they must be more than words on paper, and there must be accountability for violating them. With this verdict, we have brought some accountability. Finally, this verdict demands us to never give up the hope that we can make enduring change. Generations of people said slavery would never end. Generations said Jim Crow would never end. Generations said women would never be equal to men. Generations said if you were different in any way, you could never be a full and equal member of our society. Today, we have to end this travesty of recurring, enduring deaths at the hands of law enforcement. Those beliefs are things we have to focus our attention on. And as I now do close, I just want to say to you, the work of our generation is to put unaccountable law enforcement behind us. It's time to transform the relationship between community and the people who are sworn to protect them from one that is mistrustful, suspicious, and in some cases terrifying, into one that is empathetic, compassionate, and affirming. That will benefit everyone, including police officers who deserve to serve in a profession that is honored, in departments where they don't have to worry about colleagues who don't follow the rules. Now that work is in your hands. The work of our generation is to put an end to the vestiges of Jim Crow and the centuries of trauma and finally put an end to racism. We can end it. It doesn't have to be with us into the future if we decide now to have true liberty and justice for all. The work of our generation is to say goodbye to old practices that don't serve us anymore and to put them all behind us. One conviction, even one like this one can create a powerful new opening to shed old practices and reset relationships. So with that, I just want to say that I do hope that people step forward and understand that nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. You can do something the way like everyday people like Donald Williams and Genevieve Hanson and Christopher Martin and Charles McMillan and all those teenagers and young people stepped up and did something. You can do things like help pass the George Floyd Justice and Accountability Act. It's in your hands. Let's get the work done. And now I'd like to invite my friend and partner in justice, Michael Freeman, Hennepin County Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. First, I want once again to extend my heartfelt sympathies to the families of George Floyd. I hope today's verdict provides some measure of closure for them. And let me say what a tremendous job Attorney General Keith Ellison did in recruiting and organizing a talented team of prosecutors and supporting staff. Great job. Matt Frank, Jerry Blackwell, Steve Schlescher, and Aaron Eldridge were exceptional. Their use of experts, evidence, and witnesses left the jury no alternative but to find Mr. Chauvin guilty. We and the people of Minnesota should rightly be proud of these four and your entire staff of volunteers and assistant attorney generals and the jobs they did over the last 7 weeks. I'm also proud from the moment that the Hennepin County Attorney's Office charged Derek Chauvin with murder and manslaughter 4 days after George Floyd's murder, our team worked long hours side by side with the Attorney General's team. Managing Attorney Gene Burdorf did legal analysis and writing. Assistant Hennepin County Attorney Joshua Larson did witness prep and strategy development. And Vernona Boswell, manager of our Victim Services Division, has been in direct contact for nearly a year now with the family of George Floyd. Victim and witness advocates Jessica Immerman and Keith Johnson managed all the witnesses, civilian and professional. My two deputies, Lolita Ioa and Andy Lefevre, and I supplied strategic advice and coordination to this talented team 24/7. These guilty verdicts against Mr. Chauvin cannot be the end of the conversation about officer killings of civilians. We need to prevent these killings in the first place. The Minnesota legislature, as it moves into the final 3 weeks of the session, must pass a number of bills that will make policing fairer and safer for all, but especially for black men and women and other people of color. I've been lobbying legislators to pass these critical bills. If they fail, then it will be time once again to have a statewide task force to hold hearings and come up with model legislation intending to put an end to these deaths. I am prepared to be part of that fight. Again, Keith, great job.
Thank you, Mike. And now I'd like to ask the trial lawyers to share some thoughts if they have any. But before I do that, I'd like to myself thank a number of people. And I'm just going to start by, why don't we just have our trial lawyers come forward, and then we'll thank our whole team. So, Jerry, Steve, which one of y'all want to do it? Matt, where'd Matt go? Yeah, right up here.
Thank you, Attorney General Ellison. And when I say thank you to Attorney General Ellison, I want to thank you for calling me and calling me back into public service, which is something that I was able to do as a federal prosecutor, as a state prosecutor, as an assistant county attorney in the United States Army. When I left private practice, I thought those days were behind me, but I received a call, and it was from Keith Ellison. And he gave me the opportunity to step back into public service, something that is so important to me, something that I cherish. And I would just encourage anyone, if you get a call like that as an attorney, it's a privileged life, it's a noble profession. And if somebody calls you and they ask you for help, don't overthink it. Just do it. As I've found in my career, you get a lot more than you give. I'm honored to have stood with the Floyd family, to stood with the state of Minnesota as we go through this painful process together. And it's been my privilege to practice with this incredible, gifted trial team. And so I stand here today in gratitude. I'm thankful. I want to thank the jury for their service, for doing what was right and decent and correct and speaking the truth and finding the right verdict in this case.
I'm Jerry Blackwell, and my comments are going to be fairly brief. I want to first say thank you to all of these selfless servants that you see standing here and the many more that you do not see, who had the willingness, the courage, the passion, the intentional fortitude to get into good trouble. They stepped into the light and they shine. And for that, I say thank you. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I've had to serve. Now, no verdict can bring George Perry Floyd back to us. But this verdict does give a message to his family that he was somebody, that his life mattered, that all of our lives matter. And that's important. And I also hope that this verdict, for all of the rest of collective, all of us, will help us further along the road toward a better humanity. Thank you all.
Matt Frank.
Well, I can't really follow that too much, but I just want to say that it's been really a privilege to work with this awesome group of dedicated, hardworking people in this endeavor. But it's also been just a total privilege to get to know the Floyd family and to spend time with them and get to know them. Because first and foremost, this is for you, George Floyd, and for your family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. So let me also thank very publicly Aaron Eldridge, who was part of our trial team, who's not here today, but was indispensable. Lola Velasquez Agaloo, thank you, Lola, for a wonderful job that you did. Josh Larson. Josh, thanks so much, my friend. Zuri Balmakung. Thank you, Zuri. And Natasha Robinson. I want to thank you and the next generation, the next generation of justice seekers. Dion Dodd, I want to thank you. Dion, where are you? Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, Vernona Boswell. You are a star. And I also want to thank so many other people. But with that, we're going to close our comments right now and just say that we're prepared to continue to pursue justice. Thank you.
Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison saying he would not call today's verdict justice because justice implies true restoration, but it is, he said, accountability, the first step towards justice. To recap the verdict and the headlines today, on the charge of second-degree unintentional murder, the jury